today we're talking about improving your productivity, particularly as a founder. Um, and so why what we want to essentially cover is, some quick introduction. So Debbie introduced me, shared a bit about what I do, right? And then we'll talk a bit about the three pillars that I've established around thinking about my productivity, which are like headspace, planning, and capacity. And then we'll jump right into Q&A, right? So by way of introduction, I want to kind of just like empathize with how much one has, particularly as an early stage founder, that you have going on, right? So for instance, for me, I work with Spurt. I also support We Capital as a venture partner. I run a foundation. I work with a couple of angel networks and syndicates. And then I also run a small, creative brand that like curates experiences, right? So the interesting thing about that is that all of those things are demanding on my time in different ways. And I always have to think about how do I do the things that are interesting to me, that I care about, but also make sure that I'm actually able to, give the best. So there's a kind of like framework. It's called the T framework. Basically, your time, your energy, and your attention, right? And it's a very, very simple framework of thinking around what are some of the blockers or the challenges that affect productivity at times, right? And the idea is that if you're exhausted, your productivity is affected, right? If your attention, if you're distracted, i.e., you don't have a lot of attention, then that affects your productivity as well. And then if you're busy, right, you don't have enough time, then that affects your productivity as well. So the principle here is that these three elements, right, broadly speaking, are the components of being able to have that right productivity recipe. So what I do, right, in response to like understanding that, okay, my time, my energy, and my attention affect my productivity, is I have this kind of like three-pillar approach to maintaining productivity that I hope will also be helpful for you. So the first aspect of that for me is like this headspace aspect, right? And it's around sort of like fiercely protecting your mental health, particularly as a woman founder. The second bit is around sort of planning, right? So organizing my life, not just the work I do. So sometimes what I've seen is that folks are very reasonably decent, right? Or even quite good at managing their work, but not so much at managing their life. Unfortunately, like the lines that we create are only sort of like artificial, right? In reality, these things bleed into each other if they're not properly managed. And so this idea of planning and organizing your life to save time and to create time as well is really important. And then the last bit around this for me for productivity is also your capacity, right? So being able to like develop your skills and your knowledge. One of the things that I've seen, especially as I've had the opportunity to also watch people beginning their careers or, starting to build their businesses, is just how much what you don't know affects how long it takes you to do things, right? So things that like now I'm able to do 30 minutes, and then like I'm watching my intern spend 6 hours on it, and I'm like, oh, wow. So that experience, that knowledge, that capacity building that you do for yourself actually goes a long way to like freeing up time for you, because you're able to do things better, you're able to do things faster, so you only have to do them once. And so essentially the principle here around headspace is around being mindful of what's going on in going on with you. Because if you don't pay attention to that, right, it's very, very easy for folks to sort of think that, so long as I'm just like in a good mood, so long as I am, just like not upset, if I'm not like bawling or crying, then everything's going to be okay. But headspace goes a little bit beyond that, right? And the principle around it is that if you don't do the right things around protecting your headspace and managing your mental health, then there's actually direct physical correlations that then directly affect your ability to sort of keep achieving the goals that you've set for yourself, right? One of the things that we also know, right, so there's been multiple studies on this, is that there's a 4x return on investments that you make in your mental health. So this is, I'm actually even talking about monetary terms, right? The amount of money that companies save when they invest in the wellness and the well-being of their companies, on average, there's a 4x return just in terms of missed staff days because they're sick, or low productivity days, team morale, and that applies to you as well. And I think especially as a woman founder, in the context that many of us find ourselves, right, which is a continent that sometimes underestimates us as women, which is culture that sometimes places interesting burdens on us as women, it's even so important to just like fiercely protect your mental health, right? And to be that like number one advocate for yourself and for your well-being. So there's 5 things that I think about, broadly speaking, to support my mental well-being. So one of them for me is pursuing meaning. What does this mean? I don't do work that I think is pointless. It's just not good for my energy. It's not good for my vibe, right? So I operate in clearness and in alignment with my purpose, and the leadership that I provide, the volunteering that I provide, just like the space that I hold around me for others, is completely rooted in that purpose. What that allows for me as well is that it's not draining, because one of the things that I realized pretty early on was that when I did things that just were not aligned with who I was and what my purpose was, it was a lot more exhausting, right? It was much, much more difficult for me to like corral myself and like my energies to like get through that. Then the second thing is actually engaging, right? And, you know, on some level, one thing is a consequence of the other, right? If you're doing something that's aligned with your purpose, if you're doing something that, you know, is tied to like what you care about and who you are, then it's even easier to engage, right? It's easier for you to be thoughtful. It's easier for you to be present, like really be in the moment, really feel that, really enjoy it. And the thing about it is that then that experience is feeding you in the same way that you're giving something to it, it's giving you as well, right? You're kind of like becoming enriched and edified by whatever that thing that you're doing is. The second thing is around connection. This is one of the hardest things for me. I was unfortunately born like a misanthrope, right? But one of the things that I try to be mildly like intentional about is trying to build a network around myself, right? And this can be hard for us, for people. Some people are naturals at it. Ife that spoke previously is one of the most magnetic people I've ever encountered. But even if you're not natural at sort of this idea of like connection and building a network, it's so important, even if it's a micro network, because sometimes we just internally don't have all those resources to kind of like keep ourselves going and prop ourselves up. But if we, put a sort of like support community and a support network around us, then they prop us up even when we don't necessarily in that moment or on that day have everything to kind of like pull ourselves up. Then the second thing that's really, really important is sort of like that positive framing. And I'll talk a bit more about this idea around positive framing, as well as the second one, which is around managing your energy. So this we'll jump right into positive framing specifically. Now, I really like optimists annoy me, right? Because I think that positive thinking is not enough, right? You need like a positive framework. It's not enough to just say, oh, everything's going to be fine. You actually have to reframe, deconstruct, and relook at the situation in a way that allows you to kind of see how everything will be okay, right? And so positive framing is that idea. It's when you kind of not just hope, right, on hope that everything will be okay, but you look at the situation and you say, okay, what are the tools, what are the things that I know or that I can learn that are going to change this situation for the better? And I think it's an extremely important tool for managing your energy, because one, you don't get down in the pits if something isn't working, but then also you actually are creating, you're taking steps to improve things when something isn't working. The next piece of this, and I think this is like so important, is managing your energy, right? That was the fifth part of my five tip tool for just like protecting your mental health. So your energy is mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, right? And thinking about all of these components intentionally is actually really, really important for just like where you sit, because sometimes you've done your juicy workout in the morning, you've done some nice meditation, maybe you had a wonderful service with your chaplain or your imam, or you just had like a bombast iftar yesterday, and you're feeling great, but then something is nagging at you at the back of your head, right? Or something, there's just a problem that's gnawing at you. So making sure you're checking in on every different metric is critical for managing the entire balance of your energy. So if we do a quick check-in right now, you just seconds, like 30 seconds, to really ask yourself that. For you right now, where are you sitting, right? So body, like physically in your body, how are you feeling? Are you hungry? Are you tired? Are you just feeling a little off, right? Rate yourself right now and just check in on how you're doing. Check in just like, how focused are you? How present are you in this moment right now? Or are there like 70 other things calling on your attention, right? How are you feeling? Are you feeling optimistic about your business? Are you feeling optimistic about the path that you've put yourself on, And do you feel like what you're doing, where you're spending your time, where you're spending your energy, do you feel like you're doing what you believe matters? And this is something that I do with myself multiple times a day, but at least once a day, just to check in. And what's important for me is that if I'm having multiple check-ins that are just turning up really low numbers, I know that something is off. And so I conduct a bit of a life audit to be like, what is this thing that is not feeding me? What is this thing that's like parasitic on my energy? And how do I rebalance that? Does that make sense? Can you just confirm for me? Because I want to wrap up this piece around managing your energy. So if you confirm for me that everything is following, awesome. Thank you so much, Debbie. I appreciate that. So the second piece here is then around planning, right? So if you think about where we started, which is, okay, where's your headspace? Where's your mind at? How's your energy level? Then the second piece is around planning, right? Set clear goals and intentions for each week. We get so busy, we get so overwhelmed that we move through life without intention. But intentionality, planning, they are really, really excellent for actually meeting the goals that we want to meet, because you kind of need to, I think it was the lady that did the product roadmap that said, if you don't know where you're going, then you can just, take any route, right? Because there's nowhere. And this is, that really resonated with me, because it's absolutely true about the way that we spend our time, the way that we go through the week, the way that we move in the world. So whenever your week begins, whether it begins on Friday or Saturday or Sunday or Monday or whatever, just at the beginning of your week, set clear intentions and set clear goals, right? Then based on those goals, create a to-do list, right? And then try to also establish some sort of schedule. It doesn't have to be a rigid schedule. I'm a little OCD, and so and I've gotten better as I've gotten older. When I was much, much younger, I scheduled my day down to like 5-minute blocks, right? You don't need to be that insane. Nobody needs that, right? But you can create broad schedules around your day. So you understand, okay, this is kind of what my Mondays are like. This is what my Tuesdays are like. Thursdays are my chill days. My Saturdays are busy. I like to spend them at home or whatever. But you want to have a clear sense of what your schedule is. And then the very last thing here is really sort of like setting deadlines, right? So many of us aspire to things, but like with no timeline, right? And I think that this applies not just to the professional, but also to the personal. When you say you want to do something, when you set an intention, have deadlines, and then be honest with yourself about when things aren't working so that you can course correct, so that you can troubleshoot, right? And this all again comes back to intention and intentionality. So when it comes to this planning piece, right? One of the things that I learned very early on that I think has just made my life really useful is thinking about the 168 hours that I have in a week. So I don't really think about my life in terms of days, but I think about it in terms of weeks. And so I say to myself, okay, how am I using my 168 hours? At one point in my life, the breakdown was maybe like 36 hours for sleep, maybe 40 hours for learning, 30 hours for pleasure, 70 hours for work, whatever it is. You need to actually do that 168-hour check and say to yourself, ballpark, how is my week spent? So if you take the next week that's coming up and actually track how are you spending your time, and just make a note of it so you're more aware, right? Then try and create time blocks to kind of like re-engineer your schedule. If you realize that you're doing things in a different, like one of the things I do is like, I don't just like check my mail all throughout the day. I have a time block for checking my email. And then people know that if they need to reach me urgently, they can send me a WhatsApp message, and then I will treat that urgently. Otherwise, my email time block is my email time block, right? My Netflix time block is my Netflix time block, whatever it is, right? And then you cut time wasting. So when you do that tracking for the week, look at the things that you can cut from your schedule so that you can save time. Then also like plan ahead, right? And then also recognize, like I said at the beginning, that your life, your experience is integrated, right? So you can't just, it has to be fluid, essentially. You have to create fluidity and you have to create flexibility. So around this kind of circle are some of the tools that I know are pretty useful. So Calendly is one of the things where, you can feed in your different calendars, and then it will allow other people who want to book meetings. I see people sometimes exchange 20 emails back and forth trying to schedule meetings. That's a time-wasting activity you can cut by simply using a tool like Calendly. And it's actually not the only tool of its kind that exists. The other tool that's here, that little droplet type logo, is something called Text. Text actually allows you to integrate all your different messaging or social platforms into one app. So you don't have to go logging after logging after logging, and then also getting caught up in that like dead scroll of like, oh, I'm on TikTok forever, or I'm on Instagram forever. So it really gets you to put all the messages, which is what's relevant, right? The actual interaction, not the, voyeuristic viewing of other people's pretend lives online, but the actual interactions that you're having. You get that all consolidated in one place, so you're not missing out on things that are important, right? The other one on that check mark is to do, right? There's lots of to-do list apps. There's lots of tracking apps that you can use. And then the very one at the top there is specifically the logo for Otter AI. But again, all these logos are symbolic, right? So Otter AI is something that allows you to basically transcribe your meetings, and then it actually allows you to sort of highlight things. So that way, for instance, if you're in a meeting that you have to attend for whatever reason, but you know that your attention in that meeting isn't required, then you can use your Otter AI to pick up the things that you need, or your whatever transcribing tool that you're using to pick up the critical points, and then do something else while you're in that meeting, right? I am a chronic and notorious multitasker, only because I make a determination around how much of my attention is needed in something. But then I also have tools to make sure that I don't miss important things that are happening in a meeting or during something that I'm supposed to be fully engaged in. Right now, I use Microsoft for all of these things because it just works for me. Some people find it clunky, but for me, like calendar bookings, message integration, my drive, everything, like Microsoft is really good about that. So I would definitely plug, putting your life on Microsoft 365. It really does. But other than that, there's lots of tools. And these are some emblematic options of the tools that are available to you for just like organizing a little better. Then the next piece of this is really thinking about when you set out your day, right? Creating benchmarks that are simple and achievable. So there's something called the 1-3-5 list. And the easiest way to think about it is, what's the one thing I have to do today? Like, I must do, right? And then what are 3 things that I could do today, so I should try to do, right? Like, I could do them and they won't take too much of my time, so I should try to do. Then what are 5 things that are going to take so little effort, right, that I should just take them as quick wins? Quick wins are so important for your headspace, right? Because when you like that productivity vibe, it's so addictive. When you just feel like you're killing it, you're crushing it, you're like, yes, checklist, 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 checklist. You're like, I'm just the greatest. And that energy is so good for propelling you forward to tackle harder things, to do things that take a little bit more of your time. So I use the 1-3-5 list, especially when I'm like PMSing or like I'm having a really hard time, as a way to kind of like generate some quick win energy, some like Kristin is the greatest in the world energy for propelling myself forward and getting through the harder things I have to do. Because good energy feeds itself. It's like it creates a virtuous cycle, and bad energy creates a vicious cycle. And like Debbie said, there's certainly mood boosters for you. So that's something that I highly encourage, is that you start to use the 1-3-5 list to kind of like push yourself forward through the day. The other technique that I really like is something called the Pomodoro technique. It comes out of helping people in academia to do, intense sprints of writing, but I find that it's actually applicable across different things. So the idea with the Pomodoro technique is that you set timers of 25 minutes, you have intense laser focus on whatever it is you said you're doing, you take a 5-minute break, you come back, and that break has to be a real break. Step completely away from what you're doing for exactly 5 minutes, come back again, do another 25-minute sprint, you come back again, you do another 25-minute sprint. So it's about 90 minutes, right? And so that allows you to do some really, really intense and high quality work. And then after your 90-minute sprint, you must take a 30-minute break to completely reset, and then you can come back again if you need to do it. I find the Pomodoro technique extremely helpful, especially if you need to tackle something that's difficult or something that you require a lot of attention for. So it's something that you should just like put, in your back pocket as a tool that you can use to help with your productivity. Now, the last piece of this is really around respecting your body clock, right? We live in a society that has so many rules about how you're supposed to be, what's acceptable, how you dress, whatever. But respect your body. If you respect your body, you will do incredibly more. A long time ago, I realized that I just do way more at night than I do during the day. And really, unless I can tell that it's really important or it's really going to hold somebody back, I don't engage with people in the morning. It's a waste of my time. I'm distracted. It just doesn't work. I just don't do it, right? So, and I make exceptions when I need to, but in general, I don't engage in the mornings, right? Respect your body clock, because it allows you to do more. Sometimes people are like, wow, how'd you get so much done? There's nothing magical about it. There's nothing exceptional about it. I just have the utmost respect for what it is that I need to be doing and how I'm feeling at any given point in time. And it's not obnoxious, it's not bad, it's good for you. And it allows you to get to where you want to be, because your body has its own natural circadian rhythm. And of course, there's work that you can do to shift your circadian rhythm if you want to. If you've ever taken a flight or you've ever done something, you know that like sometimes, if something traumatic happens, your period can be delayed 5 days, or, if you take a flight, you have trouble sleeping and, jet lag and all of these things. So you can shift your circadian rhythm if you want to. But what's important is whether you're shifting it or you're not shifting it, is respect it and respect your body. When you're tired, be tired. Take a break, even if it's just 20 minutes, right? No good work is done by sleepy, exhausted people. They lied to you if they told you that, right? And it's not like that grinding against yourself, grinding against your body just does nothing for you, right? So you push yourself hard, but you don't push yourself so you wear yourself down, right? Now, the last piece of this is capacity, right? So that's the last piece of the pillar, right? And like I said, you're able to do things better, you're able to do things faster if you have expertise, if you get better at doing them. And you get better by just working, right? The more you do, the better you are, the more you learn, the better you are. So if you've decided that you're going to be, and you're building something in fintech, or you're building something in agriculture, or you're building something in the event space, develop the technical skills relevant, because it allows you to see problems quicker, it allows you to troubleshoot quicker, it allows you to build better, right? Then you cultivate your soft skills, because you're also your team leaders, all of you, so you're also leading a team, and you need those soft skills to be able to help people to see what you're able to see, because of that capacity that you have, right? Because of that expertise that you have, right? And then embrace a growth mindset. I find that coming back, and I think you'll see that, like, headspace, mindset, all of these things have been really, really important around this kind of like productivity piece. Because the truth is, if you don't have a sense that you can do better, that, I was doing a session with my team where I was helping them to understand that creativity is not a talent, it is a skill. And this is one of those things that people don't realize, right? Is that you can hone anything that you want to hone as a skill, right? You're never going to be able to like sing like Mariah Carey, right? But you can learn to sing very well technically with practice. These are things that, like, sometimes, because we live in a society that likes to create these genius models, we sometimes think that, oh, it's just not my calling, it's not my place, right? But the truth is that you can be anything, you can build anything if you put your mind to it. That's just a fact, right? And you see this. I don't know if you've ever had that moment when you see people that you saw them when you were starting, and you're like, interesting. And then 5 years later, they're like killing it. And you're like, but I thought I was better than you. But they just worked hard at it, right? And that's the truth, right? Sometimes we spend so much energy like feeling superior or hating on others, but we don't realize that energy can actually be directed at building ourselves up and building our capacity, right? So there's a couple of models here that are useful, right? So the GROW model is typically, if you've ever been with a life coach or some sort of like, business support mentor, they'll tell you about the GROW model, right? Which is around improving your capacity. So it starts from, what do you want to achieve? That's your goal. Where are you now? What's the reality? And don't lie to yourself, right? And then what options do you have? And then and the W of the GROW model is so important. What choices will you make based on what you've seen in terms of your reality, your goal, and your options? These things go together and really help you in terms of like setting out capacity development, like tactics for yourself. The other thing, and this is more something for you to be mindful about, is that 70 to 20 10 model for learning. I know people are addicted to courses and certificates and all of those things. And it's like, it's great. I love it. I am happy for people. Keep doing them. I'm probably overeducated. So, far be it from me to criticize anybody. But the truth is that you can only get so much from structured learning. Social learning and in context, experiential learning take you way far forward. Now, most of you are team leaders, most of you are founders. So what you'll actually see is that when you look back on what you've accomplished and how much you've learned just doing the daily of building your business, you're actually quite shocked, right? Things that you didn't think you could possibly do, ways that you didn't think you could possibly stretch. That just like experience of being in it in the day-to-day actually can be extremely impactful for you. So realize that credentialed learning, structured learning sometimes can be good for like meeting social markers and social acknowledgements that will also help you propel your business forward. So I don't want to discount that at all. But please be mindful that we learn by doing. We're social creatures. So if you really, really want to be kick-ass at something, you have to get your hands dirty, right? You have to roll your sleeves up and really just get in there, make the mistakes, do it terribly over and over again. And then you realize that from time to time, you get less terrible at it.